Dear students, today in this module we will be discussing about solid waste disposal. The solid waste disposal will be discussed in two modules, sanitary landfilling 1 and sanitary landfilling 2. In this module we will be discussing about the uncontrolled dumping and controlled dumping, and also the problem associated with uncontrolled dumping and what is the significance of controlled dumping. Now, increasing population, urbanization, industrialization has resulted in the generation of huge quantum of waste. Now, this waste is generally disposed of in sea, land and in open areas without any protection. Now, when you dispose it off in these sea, water bodies and land, it creates a lot of environmental and health hazards. When they are disposed of in an open area without any protection, it contaminates your air, water, soil and creates a lot of health hazards. To avoid these, you should have a proper waste management plan so that it will decrease the chaos or the effects that it causes on the environment and on the health of an individual. Now, waste management plan starts with waste generation at the source, waste collection, waste transfer and transport into a intermediate station called as a transfer station. Then they are processed and treated. The residue that is left out after processing or after treatment are generally disposed of in a controlled environment. Now, disposal is the last step in a waste management plan. Generally, the waste are disposed of in open dumps. As I told you earlier, they create a lot of chaos. Now, when in a waste management plan, disposal is done in an area in a controlled condition where you protect the environment, the different matrices of environment like your soil, water, air and so on. Now, with this introduction, now let us get into the learning objectives of this module. The learning objectives of this module would be, we will understand what is waste disposal, then we will discuss about the various problems which are associated when you dump the waste in an open land. Then we will discuss what is controlled and uncontrolled dumping. Now, under controlled dumping, what is controlled dumping and what are the criteria which you will look into while selecting a site for a landfill operation. Then we will discuss about what are the different components and types of landfill. Now, disposal, as I told you earlier, is the final step in the waste management plan. All solid waste ends up in a disposal site, either directly or after processing and treatment, it ends in a disposal site. Most of the developing and underdeveloped countries, the solid waste is dumped in an open land without any protection or environmental control. Now, this is unsafe and creates a lot of environmental and health hazards. Now, they are in some countries they are also disposed of in water bodies like sea, ocean, lake, river. In recent times you might have heard about the marine pollution, the plastic especially, where lot of plastics are found in many oceans. So, that is another example. Now, in developed countries they practice a system of safe or controlled dumping. Now, this controlled dumping is called as landfill. Now, landfill is nothing but an engineered structure where you provide all protection and contain the waste in the landfill so that it does not contaminate or affect the different environmental matrices. Now, let us discuss about what is uncontrolled dumping and what are the problems that are associated with the open dumping. Uncontrolled dumping is also called as open dumping. It is one of the most common method of waste disposal and it is practiced in many parts of the world, especially in the developed and the developing countries. Now, wastes are dumped at a designated site. You choose a certain land area which is barren and you choose or designate that site for dumping the waste that is being collected from different parts of the town or city or metropolitan city. Now, the waste that is disposed of in these areas, they remain for a long period of time and as I told you, they affect the environment and health of the individual, causing a lot of diseases to the animals as well as human beings. Now, due to these problems, the concept of landfills were developed. The landfills are nothing but a controlled way of containing the waste and it is considered as one of the safe option. Now, before getting into the details of what is a landfill or what are the components and the types of landfills, let us discuss what are the problems that are associated with the open or uncontrolled dumping. Why actually you need a controlled dumping or a landfill? Now, the problems associated with open dumping are: one, as I told you earlier, it contaminates your soil, water and air. Now, during uncontrolled dumping, what happens is like a watery liquid called as leachate oozes out from the waste material. Now, you all know waste material, any waste material contains some amount of moisture. During decomposition or degradation, this moisture just oozes out from the waste material, which is called as the leachate. Now, when this leachate percolates into the soil, it contaminates the soil. Through soil, it slowly infiltrates and then enters into the water body, and when it enters into the water body, it will again contaminate your groundwater, and when it is carried away by rain, it will contaminate your surface water. So, the watery liquid, when it percolates into the soil, it carries a lot of contaminants with it and various toxic pollutants. Now, once it enters into the soil, it affects the diversity of microbes which are present in the soil, and also it will disturb the vegetation of that particular area. Now, this again I told you, through the soil medium the water leaches or percolates into the groundwater and then contaminate them. Now, when there is heavy rainfall or any form of precipitation, when it falls on the waste material, it will wash away a lot of material which is present in the waste. Along with that, leachate also gets mixed with the rainwater and it is carried off as surface runoff. Now, this surface runoff, once again when it enters into the water body, it starts polluting the surface water bodies like rivers, lakes, streams and so on. Now, open dumps also serve as a breeding ground for a lot of diseases. Health hazards are created due to this. Now, you can see wherever the waste is accumulated, you can see a lot of flies, mosquitoes, rodents and also a lot of other stray animals like dogs, pigs, cows, which acts like a carrier. Now, one, it serves as a breeding ground, and second, these animals acts like a carrier, and from the waste dumps, these animals bring the disease causing organisms into the residential area and commercial area, and through which the diseases spread. Now, since the waste is dumped in an open area without any cover, the wind carries a lot of waste. The wind, when one blow of wind, it carries a lot of material, and these materials fly and stick on to the traffic signals or on vehicles. Sometimes it can cause accidents too. So, they are as dangerous as that. To recover the valuable metals present in the waste dump, the rag pickers, what do is they set fire. This results in the emission of particulate matter and other gaseous emissions causing air pollution. In addition to that, sometimes you see in wherever the waste is piled up, you can see some smoke coming up. One reason can be the rag pickers who set fire. The other reason is like when the waste is being compressed and compressed and compressed, it starts, the air which is there, it causes combustion. As a result also the smoke keeps coming out. Now, again smoke is a air pollutant and it causes a air pollution problem, because during burning it emits a lot of gaseous pollutants like your carbon dioxide, methane, volatile organic carbons, etc. Even in addition to the smoke or during due to burning, during degradation, waste degradation also certain compounds are or certain gases are produced. These gases again it can be carbon dioxide, methane or any volatile organic carbons which are produced during the bacterial or microbial degradation of the waste material. Now, the gases which are produced like your carbon dioxide, methane, they are all greenhouse gases because they have a global warming potential. Another problem with open dumps is that wherever you dump or dispose of this waste, the land degradation takes place and it gets deteriorated. The waste dumped in open dumps create an unpleasant odor, and also it affects the aestheticity of the area. Aestheticity means the area where you dispose of the waste, it will give an unpleasant look. You will not like to look at those areas where the waste is just piled up in an open area. So, that is the aestheticity. I mean the beauty of the area is lost. Now, the waste dumps or piles Again, as I told you earlier, they attract a lot of insect, rodents, birds and animals, and sometimes the waste land, wherever the waste, the open dumps acts like a breeding ground for certain animals and birds. Sometimes when these migratory birds, when they cross these open dumps, they think they get food, so they settle there. So, when they take the food which is contaminated or which is present in the open dumps, what happens is like again these toxicants enter into the food chain through these birds and animals. One, the birds gets affected, animals gets affected, and finally it ends up in the upper or top level of the food chain where human beings are also affected. So, now these are the different problems that are associated with open dumping. So, when you do an open dumping, it creates a lot of environmental and health hazards. These are some of the photographs of open dump where you can see a lot of waste materials are just accumulated, and you can also see how many birds sit in these open areas and then they feed on these waste material. Now, let us discuss about controlled dumping. Now, so far we have discussed what is uncontrolled dumping and what are the different problems that are associated with uncontrolled dumping. Now, there should be an alternative for uncontrolled dumping, that is nothing but your landfilling. Landfills are nothing but engineered structure designed for the safe containment of waste. Now, they are safe method of waste disposal and they are designed to operate according to the acceptable standards. It is designed in a way so that it protects the environment and health of the people. Now, landfills are the largest route of disposal, and this particular option of waste disposal is especially suitable when the land is available at an affordable cost, and if you have an adequate workforce and technical resources. If all these things are available, then landfill would be a better option for containing your waste in a safe manner. Now, how do you select a site for a landfill or for an open dump? This depends on certain criteria which we will discuss in detail. The selection of a site for a waste landfill generally depends on the proximity of the site to the source of generation. That means it should be near the source of generation. The distance from the boundary of the site to the residential areas, agricultural area or an urban site should be little away. Generally, these sites are located on the outskirts of the city. Now, accessibility and suitability of access roads, I mean the site that you are selecting should have a proper network connectivity, transport connectivity should be there. It should have at least some access roads, so that it will be easy for the trucks to carry the waste and dispose them off. So, generally it should be in the outskirts of the city, far away from the residential area, commercial area or any industrial area. Then it should have proper access roads, so that the waste is collected properly. Then you should try maximum to reduce the impact on the environment. So, what you have to do is the hydrological and hydrogeological stability of the site should be checked. The geological and hydrogeological stability of the site, it's very important. Now, the site where you are choosing for open dumping or for landfilling, it should not be under the risk of any hazard, like it should not face any flooding or it should not be under any landslide prone area or avalanches. Now, also you should assess the soil and bedrock grain, like your grain size, mineralogy, permeability, all these things you should check, because if there is any leakage in your the liner system or the component of your landfill, it should not permeate much. The soil which is below this landfill area, it should have less permeability. So, that is the reason why you should assess the soil and bedrock grain size, like mineralogy, permeability and so on. Then hydrological isolation is very important. You should isolate from the groundwater and the surface water sources. Now, the groundwater table should be very low. Then the distance from the boundary of the site to the waterways should be far away. Then the meteorological data also you should take care of, like your rainfall, wind speed, wind direction, because once you start dumping the waste, when you have the wind speed and wind direction is very high, again it will carry off the waste, and that is why you have to take care of the wind speed and wind direction. Again, rainfall, if you see, higher the rainfall, more will be the leachate generation. Again, you should take care of rainfall conditions also. Then before or while you select a site or after you select a site, a topographical survey should be done. This is generally undertaken to calculate the available void space so that you can find out how much waste can be loaded in that particular site. Also you should know what is the background levels of water or air quality. For example, if you select a site, you find certain points, collect the groundwater and then measure the water or do a water quality analysis, so that in future if there is any leakage of this leachate into the groundwater, you can check and compare, so that you can find out whether there is any leakage or any disturbance in your liner system. Same way for the air quality also. During the process of degradation in the landfill, gases will be generated and these gases will be liberated into the atmosphere. So, if you have a air quality analysis before constructing the site, it will act like a reference, so that you can cross check after, you can use it for post closure air monitoring. Also you should assess the direct and the indirect impacts that it will create on the human beings, flora, fauna, soil, water, air, climate and other landscape. Also you should take care if there is any cultural heritage area around, that also you should see what is the impact that this particular site it is going to create on the these particular environmental as well as the ecosystem. The site that you select should be always away from the UNESCO heritage site, national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, monuments and places of significant importance. That means the site which you are selecting for landfill should be away from all these areas. It should not be near wildlife sanctuaries or wildlife corridors, monuments and any UNESCO heritage sites. Also the land that you are selecting for the landfill purpose should have less agricultural productivity. Mostly barren land or fallow lands are chosen for this purpose. Dear students, in the first part of this module, we discussed about the concept of waste disposal and how waste is being disposed of in the oceans or land without any protection in olden times, and how waste is being disposed in recent times, and then we also saw how the waste is being disposed in the developed or developing countries. Then we discussed about what is controlled and uncontrolled dumping and also the problems associated with uncontrolled dumping. Now, controlled dumping, what is a landfill? As I told you, it is an engineered structure, and how or what is the significance of landfills we saw. Now, while you select a site for an open dumping or an uncontrolled dumping, what are the criteria that you will look into while selecting a site? That also we discussed. Now, in the second part, we will discuss what are the different considerations that you have to see again for a landfill. Now, this is specifically about the major design aspect when you construct or when you design a landfill, what are the criteria that you will look into, we will discuss that, and then we will discuss what are the components and the types of landfills. Now, what are the considerations for landfills? As I told you earlier, a waste landfill is a major design and engineering project, and hence you have to look into a lot of considerations when you engineer a landfill structure. So, now what are those considerations? We will discuss them in detail. Now, the important considerations which you have to look into while engineering a landfill is: 1. Site capacity, waste density, settlement, material requirement, drainage and operational practice. Now, we will discuss each of them in detail. Now, site capacity, as I told you, capacity of the site is one of the important key factor which determines the design of a landfill. The capacity of the landfill is decided based on: 1. On the amount of waste generated, 2. Waste density, 3. Amount of intermediate and daily cover, 4. Thickness of capping system, and 5. The amount of settlement that occurs in the landfill. The second consideration is your waste density. The density of waste within the landfill, they keep varying due to various factors. 1. The degree of pre-compaction of the waste before emplacement. The variation also occurs in the components within the waste. Then the progression of degradation, the amount of daily and intermediate cover, and the mass of overlaying waste. All these factors determines the waste settlement in a landfill. The degree of pre-compaction of the waste influences the amount of waste to be loaded into the landfill. It also influences the amount of waste settlement in a landfill. The waste density ranges from 0.65 to 0.85 tons per meter cube. It can also go up to 0.4 or 1.23 tons per meter cube depending upon the biodegradable and the inert waste that is present in the waste mixture. For inert waste, the density can go up to 1.5 ton per meter cube. The next important factor which you have to consider while designing a landfill is the settlement. Now, settlement of waste in a landfill occurs due to physical rearrangement of waste as soon as you place them in the landfill, then due to biological, physical and chemical degradation process, and due to the overburden pressure due to compaction by weight. I mean, if you place waste layer by layer one over the other, the top layers will create a pressure on the bottom layer, because of which a compaction will occur. This also results in the settlement of waste. Now, typical long term settlement values for municipal solid waste are 15 to 20% reduction. Around 90% of settlement takes place in the first 5 years. For inert waste, the settlement takes many years, even it goes over a period of 50 years. Now, 3 main stages of settlement occurs in the landfill. One is the initial compression, where the waste is instantaneously compacted by compression. Now, this removes all the void spaces between the particles. This mainly occurs as I told you, by overlaying waste. The bottom layers will be pressed by the waste on the top layers. Then also the vehicles which carry this waste over this landfill area also creates compaction, because these vehicles are heavy tired vehicles, and when they move over the waste, they will again create pressure on the lower layers, and this results in compaction. The second type of settlement is your primary compression, which occurs due to dissipation of pore water and gases from the void space, and generally they take place around 30 days. The third stage of settlement is your secondary compression, where it takes many years, and this occurs due to biodegradation of waste. Now, leachate and landfill gas reduces the mass and volume. The amount and rate of landfill settlement generally depends on certain factors like initial void volume of the waste, compaction of the waste and thickness of the waste. Deeper the landfill, more will be the settlement. The next factor that you should consider while designing a landfill is the material requirement. Now, you need a lot of material for constructing a landfill. So, the material availability or in the nearby area or in the close vicinity, it should be considered. For the construction of landfills, a lot of materials are required, like your natural clay, sand, gravel and other soil, which are generally used as a lining material. Now, the clay generally provides an additional low permeability, gravel for drainage and leachate collection system, clay for capping material and restoration soil. So, these are the general materials which are required. So, wherever you select a site for constructing a landfill, you should see whether the land or the site itself is having these material, or at least they should be available in the close vicinity. Now, if these materials are available near the site, it will reduce the cost and it will increase the ease of operation. The material is also required for daily cover to control wind blown litter, scavengers, fire and odor. For example, every day when the waste is loaded onto the landfill, on top of it you spread one layer of soil. Now, by doing so, what happens is like it will control the wind blown litter, and it will also avoid fires, odor problem and also scavenging due to animals as well as human beings. There are many cover materials which are available, like your soil, garden waste, or also you can use any alternate materials like your reusable blanket material or other inert waste. The daily cover uses the valuable void space and reduces the operating lifetime of the site. That is a disadvantage of this cover material. The next factor is drainage. Now, this is again another important factor that needs to be considered while constructing a landfill. Now, the excess water that is received either during rainfall or runoff from the surrounding areas should not be allowed to infiltrate into the site. So, you should have cut off drains both around and inside the site, so that the water can be collected and you can prevent the waste from getting too wet and also avoid leachate generation. Now, capping acts as a barrier system and they will also reduce the excess water which enters into the site and through the waste. The last criteria which you have to look into while considering or while engineering a landfill is the operational practices. Now, the daily operation of a landfill, including your traffic movement, cover material, storage, laying, security, etc., should all be considered while you engineer or design a landfill. Now, a typical modern landfill site will consist of a secure, fenced, landscaped site with proper access route for the waste transport vehicle. Now, let us look into the various components of a landfill. A landfill is generally composed of three main components. One is your liner system, second is your waste emplacement cell, and third is your cover or cap material. In addition to this, you also have a leachate collection system which becomes a part of your liner system. Then you have a groundwater monitoring as well as gas monitoring systems. These are additional, or you can call it as a post closure monitoring system. Mainly, if you see, the components of a landfill are only three components. One is a liner system which is spread at the bottom of the landfill, which are designed in a way so that the leachate that is generated does not enter or percolate into the soil and contaminate the groundwater. Waste emplacement is a way by which the waste is loaded in a systematic manner, and cover or capping is a final layer on top to avoid the entry of rainwater into the waste material and also to avoid certain burrowing animals from digging into the waste material. Now, in this figure, if you see, you have this is the image of a landfill, or how actually a landfill will look like. You can see how the land is trenched out, and then liner system are laid at the bottom, and you can see leachate collection pumps which are set, and the waste is loaded in a systematic manner in the form of cells. You can see old cells at the bottom and new cells which are coming up at the top. Here you can see the truck which is disposing of the waste in a cell method. You can also find the groundwater monitoring and landfill gas monitoring stations, which are generally for post closure monitoring to find out whether there is any leakage in the liner system or your landfill cap. This is how a landfill structure actually looks like. Now, let us discuss about what are the different types of landfills. There are three different types of landfills. One, the secured landfill, sanitary landfill, and inert landfill. Secured landfills are for hazardous waste, where you need more protection for this particular waste. The sanitary landfills are for the municipal waste, and the inert landfills are for construction and demolition waste. Now, the waste landfills for hazardous waste or secured landfill. So, now let us discuss briefly about these types of landfill. So, first one is secured landfill. As I told you earlier, secured landfill are for hazardous waste. Hazardous waste are generally dangerous material which requires a safe storage, treatment and disposal. Now, they have four major characteristics: corrosivity, toxicity, reactivity and ignitability. So, accordingly they have to be contained in a safe manner. Certain hazardous wastes are not generally permitted into landfills. Some of the examples can be liquid waste, flammable waste, explosives, oxidizing waste, infectious waste, clinical or hospital waste, and used tires are not allowed in a secure landfill. Now, these landfills have very high specification contaminant barrier liner system, so that to avoid the leachate entry and landfill gas emission. Now, waste landfill gas emission, because if they contaminate, because a small contamination will lead to a very big health and environmental hazard. The second type of landfill is for non-hazardous waste or your sanitary landfill. Now, non-hazardous waste can be a municipal solid waste or any type of industrial waste which contains organic and inorganic waste, and which are generally categorized as non-hazardous. Now, stable non-reactive hazardous waste, for example, those that are solidified or vitrified, are also permitted to be deposited in a sanitary landfill, provided that their leaching behavior is equivalent to the normal municipal solid waste. Now, the third type of landfill is your inert landfill, especially for your construction and demolition waste. Now, the waste landfills for inert waste is defined as that which does not undergo any significant physical, chemical or biological changes. They also do not dissolve, burn, biodegrade or react physically or chemically, and they do not give rise to environmental pollution or harm human health. The total leachability and pollutant content of the inert waste is insignificant. Now, example of inert waste can be brick, glass, tile, ceramic material, concrete, stones, etc. To summarize, at the end of this module, we have discussed about what is solid waste disposal. Then we discussed about the uncontrolled and controlled dumping. Now, uncontrolled dumping, also called as open dumping. Then we discussed what are the problems that are associated with open dumping, like when you dump a waste in an open area, how it contaminates or affects your environmental matrices, like how it pollutes your air, water and soil. Then we also discussed like how they act like breeding ground for various insects and stray animals, which acts like a carrier for these diseases. Then we discussed about what is controlled dumping or landfill. We defined what is a landfill. Then we discussed about what are the criteria which you will look into while selecting a site for a landfill construction. Then we looked into various considerations for landfills, like for example, while designing or engineering a landfill, what are the criteria that you will look into. Lastly, we discussed about how the structure, what is the structure of a landfill, what are the three components that are present in the landfill. Then we discussed about the three different types of landfill, like your sanitary landfill, hazardous landfill or the secured landfill, and the third one is your inert landfill. I hope you would have enjoyed this module. Thank you.